service, didn't you? I want to thank you so much for Set Free Ministries. It's a very fitting name. We've enjoyed them. Thank you so much for this afternoon. We're going to change up a little bit. I'm going to introduce, I don't see her coming forward yet, but the lady who was very instrumental in moving this forward. And here she comes. Can those of you sitting in the back, can you keep moving forward? Thank you. Okay, we're going to have recognition of special guests, and I understand that today we have some descendants of those who are buried in the cemetery further down the plantation here at Red Hill. But I'm going to bring Hope Morrison forward. She's the CEO of Red Hill Plantation, and we owe Hope a big dose of gratitude for all her efforts and all the staff for this afternoon. So here she is, Miss Hope Morrison. Let's give her a hand clap.
Thank you so much. I am just truly honored to be standing before each of you today, paying tribute and celebrating your ancestors who lived, worked, and died at Red Hill. Everything that we are today is based on what has happened in the past. Even though my past does not look or feel anything like your past, without learning from the past, without hearing the voices of your ancestors and discovering and studying the experiences. As I was saying, without learning from the past, without hearing the voices of your ancestors, and discovering and studying the experiences they endured, we will never understand how to fully live in our future. Seeing the way your ancestors carved out family, culture, and humanity, even with the most inhumane practice imaginable, inspires us. I see Red Hill as a tool for moving us through to new possibilities of coming together. This can be a place of memory for the resistance and resilience of your ancestors, but it can also be a place where a culture was built and where faith, hope, and love prevailed. Let us come together today to dedicate Red Hill as a place of new opportunities to share all its past with everyone who visits. We want visitors to come here to look at the past, to learn from it, and to be inspired to make the future better. Now, I want to thank a few special people for being here. First, I must thank our Community Engagement Committee. All volunteers, all gave many hours of their time and did a great job. First is Chair Dr. Gloria Braxton. And we have Sherman LaPrade. Is Reverend Johnson still here?
He's gone.
Gone, okay. Reverend Johnson was also a big part of this. Ramona Battle. Philistine Mosley. Alex Garner. Sharon White is who she is. Reverend Jackson, is he here? Shelby Pennell. And Leslie King was also on the committee. She could not be here today. So let's give these people a big round of applause. Next, I want to thank Ms. Barbara Rule with the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund. Jessie Ball DuPont Fund has been instrumental in helping fund this project and what we're doing. They have been a huge support, and Barbara has been a huge personal support for me through this whole process. So thank you, Barbara. There are many other special people here today to thank. I won't list all of them by name, but know you're all appreciated for being here. I do want to thank my wonderful staff for helping make this day such a success. I couldn't do it without them. But the most important people to thank today are those of you who are descendants of the enslaved who were here at Red Hill. So you are our important guest, and we thank you for coming, for sharing in this day with us. Would all of you stand? Thank you so much. At this time, speaking of the descendants, a little bit change in the program, but we have two descendants who would like to share a little bit with you all today. The first one wants to come up, wants to read a poem. Yes, you. Her name is Janet Morgan.
First of all, greetings to all of you, and especially to fellow descendants of slaves. I want to thank the Red Hill Foundation here for the work that they've been doing, and for making this possible today. This is the only reason I would ever come to a plantation. I'm here because my ancestors were here. Thanks to all of you, to Hope Marston and Peyton Young and well, here I go again. I blame it on my age that I forget names. Please forgive me. I think I wrote them down. But anyway, I want to share a poem with you that I wrote actually in 1982. So that's 39 years ago, 4 decades ago. Something happened in my head, and all of the things that were pressing on me about religious wars in the world and race and of course slavery, my ancestry. And so rhyme and essays just came gushing out of my head. They were not forced. Sometimes I could hardly write them down. They were coming so fast. So this one I dedicated to Harriet Henry. Harriet Henry was my great-grandmother. She was a slave on this plantation. It's possible that she was even fathered by one of the Henrys. She was born in 1846. Patrick Henry, of course, died in 1799, but his slaves went on to his, to his heirs, his descendants. And so we're thinking she may have even been fathered by a Henry. She certainly looked enough like what Henrys might have looked like. And then my great-great-grandmother, Letty Henry, and Peggy Henry. I don't know if there are any of the graves here. Some of them moved on to other Patrick Henry plantations. I do want to mention Shadrach, that was brought to my attention by Sasha and Peyton. Now I remember Sasha. Thank you, Sasha. Shadrach was one of Patrick Henry's personal coachmen. Now, of course, Patrick Henry died in 1799, so we're talking a long time ago. And now to the poem. The poem is Forget Not. Forget not that I was once a slave, for I am now free. Forget not that most of the other slaves didn't look like me. The slave master's mark stamped upon my face, the mark of his brutality that violated woman of my race. Hold dear the memory of my great-grandmother, slave to master's whip and bed, can ever erase the memory from my ever-burdened head. Treasure the memory of the white grandmother who came to our home to live. I begged a merciful God forgive the years it took to her my love to give. I must not forget, nor even you, I say. We must all remember a time, a distance just away. We must all remember, lest we should forget, that the slave days of our past are still too with us yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. At this time, another descendant, Lisa Beal, wants to come up and say a few words.
Good afternoon, everybody. How you doing today? So I just wanted to say a few words because I wanted to tell a story, if I could. About 30 years ago, I had an aunt who I was very close to, who I was chatting with one day, and she asked me, we were just chatting on the phone about stuff, and she says, so-and-so and so-and-so, and I was like, who's that? You know, and started just asking her questions. And I asked her a question about her dad, and she said, well, I don't know who my dad is because he died while I was still in the womb. So I never met him. And she was about 70 years old. And I happened to live in D.C. at the time, and I had a job I didn't like, so I had plenty of extra time because I was goofing off. So I decided I could take advantage of the archives in Washington, D.C. And that's back in the day. For you youngins, you probably don't know this. It's called a microfiche. Right? And so, or something you put in and you had to figure out the code of the person's last name, the number, and all this stuff, right? So I said I wanted to give her daddy for her birthday. And it took a while, right? It took a while. But on her 80th birthday, I was able to present her with her daddy, her daddy's daddy, cousins, uncles, and all those. And her daddy was Pelton Henry, who was the son of Pollard Henry, who is the son of George Henry, who is here with his family, George, Louise, Pollard, Sally, and Jack. And it is powerful. Right? And the mere fact that I can say those names with such confidence is a blessing. So I thank everybody who came together to have me stand here today to be able to tell you my story and to know that it is a shared story. And for all the folks under the age of anything, right? I really encourage you to talk to your elders, to hear the stories, because it's the stories that make the history meaningful, right? History is nothing without the people that were involved in the things that we did and had to do sometimes to move forward. So, you know, my family are Ewells, Elams, Henrys, Prices, Spring Hill Baptist. You know, I might have gone to New York, but I am certainly country. So I just want to thank you and thank the foundation here for all the work they do. And I agree. I think this really can be a tool to bring us together because we have so many fractured lines, but when we come together, we find that we can build bridges to reconnect those lines. And I really, really think that that's what this is about, and that's what this place should be about. And we should be coming together every year so that we can continue to build those lines. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa. And we do plan on coming together every year, just so you know.
Thanks, Hope. Lisa, I was so moved by your remarks because that's so true, not just here at Red Hill, but there's so many other plantations in Virginia. And if people would just put a little time and energy and share stories, by communicating, we learn about each other because there are so many similarities, not differences, but similarities. And we'll never know that unless we talk to each other. So thank you so much. And thank you also, Miss Morgan, for your poetry. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. We always have time to change a program if it'll shine a little light on another individual who has a story to tell. So anytime anybody would like to share something this afternoon, just put your hand up and come forward and share your story. We're here to remember. Today is a day of remembrance. And it's very, very important that we all go through this process together. We had a wonderful service this morning. I call it a service. I felt like I was at church. And I was really excited. Dr. Johnson did a tremendous job. The singers, the dancers, the whole program was so meaningful and heartfelt. And I'm hoping we can have that same feeling this afternoon, okay? So just bear with us, because we have two wonderful presentations that I'm sure you're going to enjoy. I'm going to read a couple of prepared remarks. I'll be very brief. As I said before, we've come here to remember the lives of those whose labor built Red Hill Plantation. You know, when I first heard about Red Hill, there was no mention of the word plantation, but we know what really happened here. It wasn't a secret, but it was just not mentioned. Langston Hughes, who is one of the most celebrated poets of the Harlem Renaissance, was born in 1902, and he died in 1967. But he wrote a poem called Remember. The 1930s verse goes as this: remember the days of bondage, and remembering, do not stand still. Go to the highest hill and look down upon the town where you are yet a slave. That was in 1930. It's still meaningful today. Langston Hughes reminded us that the enslaver's hands are everywhere globally, and African descendants must remain forever diligent, even after the end of slavery. Is it really at the end? Just think about that. Are we really at the end of slavery? Langston Hughes calls upon us to remember that slavery destroyed our families, our way of life, which was left behind on the continent of Africa, and to look toward building our communities for sustainable life, filled without sorrow and pain, but with hope and prosperity. We must remember, while the generations have lost much of early 18th and 19th century history, African American poetic writings and the history of our lives was portrayed in poetry in Black-owned newspapers published in the North, the South, and the Midwest. Some African American poets were published in New York City in the first African American newspaper, Freedom's Journal. How many people have heard of Freedom's Journal? I was about 45 years old before I ever heard about that, and I was born in New York. So what does that tell you? It was founded in 1827. This afternoon, we're going to hear from Dr. Muriel Mickles. She's the interim president of Danville Community College, and she is currently on leave from her position as vice president of academic affairs at Central Virginia Community College in Lynchburg, Virginia. Dr. Mickles has worked extensively in the community here in Central Virginia. She is well known by the works that she has been committed to. She's also a member of Zeta Phi Beta sorority, a member of the Links Incorporated. I believe she's on the board of Humankind. So without any further delay, I'm going to bring forward Dr. Muriel Nichols, and she will favor you with a couple of poetry readings and a little historical information. Thank you. Dr. Nichols.
Thank you very much. That's such a wonderful greeting there. And I want to say to you, I have had a ball today. This has been very interesting, very enlightening, and I have learned something today. And I'm always looking forward to an opportunity to learn, and today this was just wonderful. I want to thank the Red Hill Foundation for keeping the history alive here, telling the story here, because many of these kinds of stories are not told. We don't ever hear it. But I appreciate what you are doing, and I want you to know you're doing a fine job. And for all of the descendants, I have learned a lot about what's going on here, and I am so happy that you can trace your history back to where it all began. So this is a great day today. As a matter of fact, this is a day I think of remembrance, because we've got to remember where we came from. Otherwise, we are destined to repeat it. So we cannot forget our history, and we got to tell it. It's also a day of Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving for what the ones that came before us did for us to get us where we are today. And it's also a day of celebration. Celebration that the story is being told. That the story is being told, and we are all here now to embrace it, but we're all here to keep forward movement so that we can have a positive society. What I'd like to read is a few little poems for you, and the first one is called Tears of a Slave by Africus, and this was in Freedom's Journal, dated March 14th, 1828. And the poem goes as thus. Adieu to my native shore, to the toss of the boisterous wave, to enjoy my kindred no more, but to weep the tears of a slave. By the sons of freedom I'm born to the land of the free and the brave. From my wife and children I'm torn to weep the sad tears of a slave. When I think of mother and friends, and the joy of thou countenance gave, oh, how sad my bosom it rends while weeping the tears of a slave. Oh, now I must labor for gold to pamper the pride of the knave. Oh, now I am shackled and sold to weep the sad tears of a slave. Keen sorrow so presses my heart that often I sigh from my grave while feeling the lash cruel smart and weeping the tears of a slave. Ye sons of the free and the wise, your tender compassions I crave. Alas, can your bosoms despise the pitiful tears of a slave? Can a land of Christians so pure let demons of slavery rage? Can the angel of mercy endure the pitiless tears of a slave? Just heaven, to thee I appeal. Hath thou not the power to save? In mercy thy power reveals and dry the sad tears of a slave. There's another poem here, and I'm gonna be honest, it was really long, but we cut it down thanks to Gloria Braxton. It was 23 stanzas, but we're gonna make this a little bit short, maybe about 4 or 5 stanzas. But when they were looking at the analysis of this poem, and the poem it's called The Negro Girl by Mary Darby Robinson. And it says of Robinson that she presents a tragic story of Zelma and Draco. Both of these people were African. And if you knew the story of Romeo and Juliet, you know how they were loving each other so much, but There were circumstances that kept them apart. Well, you're going to hear a theme sort of like that in this story. And these two people are in love, but sadly, by the turn of their conjugal fate, white slavers held Draco as a slave and detached him from his beloved Zelma. Zelma is the sole narrator of this poem. She depicts how her life's wheel turned toward the watery grave along with her lover Draco, swept aside in the stormy waves. So think about this now. Draco is a slave. Zelma and Draco are in love like Romeo and Juliet, very romantic. But Draco is taken into slavery, and he is on a ship. So I want you to listen to this. This is written from a white writer's perspective and written in, trying to get away from me. This was written in 1800 and by this Mary Darby Robinson, an English poet, dramatist, and novelist. Dark was the dawn, and o'er the deep the boisterous whirlwinds blew. The seabird wheeled its circling swept, and all was drear to view. And when on the beach that binds the western shore, the love-torn Zelma stood, listening the tempest roar. Her eager eyes beheld the main, while on her Draco dear, she madly called, but called in vain. No sound could Draco hear, save the shrill yelling of the fateful blast, while every seaman's heart quick shuddered as it passed. Be still, she cried, loud tempest, cease. Oh, spare the gallant souls. The thunder rolls, the wind increase, the sea, the like mountains roll. While from the deck, the storm-worn victims leap, and o'er their struggling limbs and furious bellows sweep. O barbarous power, relentless face, that heaven's high will decree that some should sleep in beds of slate, some in the roaring sea. Some nursed in splendor, deal oppression's blow, while Worth and Draco pine in slavery and woe. Behold, the angry waves conspire to check the barbarous roll, while wounded nature, vengeful ire, roars round its trembling ire. And hark, her voice re-echoes in the wind. Man was not formed by heaven to trample on his kind. Torn from my mother's aching breast, my tyrant sought my love. But in the grave shall Zelma rest, ere she will fateless prove. No Draco, thy companion, I will be to that celestial realm where Negroes shall be free. So what happened to them? He drowned, and she, needless to say, did not survive either. But it was, again, a story like Romeo and Juliet. But the main thing that kept them apart was slavery. And then a short last poem. Samuel Wright was an African-American abolitionist writing in the weekly Anglo-African magazine, and this was February 18, 1860. And this was called Address to Slavery. Slavery, oh slavery, I cannot conceive why judges and magistrates do not relieve my downtrodden people from under their hand. Restore them their freedom and give them their land. The loud voice of reason incessantly cries, ye lovers of mammon, when will ye be wise? How long will misanthropy reign in your hearts? Behold the poor souls, and consider their smarts. Upon the plantation they labor and toil, exert all their strength to enrich the soil, while the sun pours upon them in hot scorching ray, while without intermission the whole livelong day. Hope God by his power will save them at last, and bring them as Israel in ages that pass, out of the reach of proud slavery's chain, to enjoy the sweet comfort of freedom again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mickles. Please be careful. Don't fall. Whoops, I better be careful myself. Okay. All right, now we're going to enjoy a presentation from Gloria Robinson Simon. And let me just find my place. And also, let me move the microphone because she needs her hands to be free. We're changing up the program a little bit because I noticed some people are sitting there getting a little sleepy. And when it's hot and your belly is full, what comes next, right? So we're going to move it forward so that people don't embarrass themselves by going into the next stage of sleep. So this is Gloria Robinson Simon. She is again a well-known throughout Central Virginia for her theatrical performances. She has a wonderful gift as a moving storyteller. She has performed at theaters in various U.S. cities. She's worked as an admissions officer at Sweetbriar College and is currently working as a human resources consultant for many community colleges here in the area. So I bring you Gloria Robinson Simon.
I'm here. I'm really, really here. Mama Critty, I am here in your place, on your land, in your space. I'm here. You see, I grew up listening to those stories. All those stories. Every time there was a family gathering, you heard the stories. You know we kin to those people down at Red Hill. You know we connected to that Patrick Henry plantation. Mm-hmm. The stories. You know we got some Indian blood in us. You know we part Indian. Uh-huh. Mama Critty, cooking. Who is Mama Critty and why y'all talk about cooking when you say her name? The stories. Always hearing the stories, but never listening to the stories. But getting sick and tired of hearing these stories every time we have a family gathering. So I knew what to do. I would show them. I'm going to research. I'm going to find who we really are, and I'll have the stories at the next family gathering. So, after listening to, you know we part of Red Hill. My great-grandma grew up in Brook Neal, so yeah, we part of Red Hill. Okay, fine. You know we got some Indian blood. Every black person in Virginia is part Indian, okay? So we got the blood, okay? And who is Critty? Research. I'm going to be ready. And I started online. Let's start with Ancestry. And then I got in my car and I drove to museums, to libraries, to county clerk's office, and I researched, and I researched, and I researched, and I found a name. Harrison. Harrison. Harrison was born at Red Hill, so finding his name meant those weren't stories. I am connected to Red Hill because when I found the name Harrison, that was my great, 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 oh my goodness, a whole lot of them, great grandfather. I am directly connected to Red Hill, and finding Harrison, who was born here and died here, 105 years old. This was his place. When I found him, I found his father. His father lived right across that river that's on the other side of the Red Hill plantation. His father lived on the other side of that river in a 3-room cave, and his father's name was Indian Joe. I have Indian blood running in my veins because Indian Joe fathered that man Harrison, who I found. His father was Indian Joe. His father had 2 other sons. So those 2 stories were true. And when I found Harrison, and then I found his father, I found his mother, Mama Critty. Mama Critty, you were the cook on the Red Hill plantation. So the reason they said your name and the reason they used the word cook, because you cooked there over 100 years. You lived on that plantation, but I didn't listen to the stories because I didn't want to hear them. And now so many of the storytellers are gone, and I can't get their stories. So what I could do, Mama Critty, was come to where you live and stand in your space and feel your essence. And I stood in that house where you were the cook, that kitchen house that was about this big. And I saw the place where you made the food, and I looked up, and I saw that spot that you had to go up in with your 3 boys to sleep. It's hot today. How did you stand being in that little bitty space up there? Did you sometimes get so hot trying to sleep on a summer's night like this that you would come down outside and make a pallet with your boys and sleep under the stars, hoping for a cool breeze? Oh, I wish I could talk to you, Mama Critty. I wish I could ask you, how did it feel raising those 3 boys? We know that when they were raised here, they were responsible for going out and bringing back the food that you cooked. But I also, in my research, found out that Mrs. Henry had 11 children. How much cooking did you have to do, Mama Critty? Those boys might be bringing the food back in for you to cook, but another thing I wish I could ask you. When they were little, did you have the option to nurse your babies? Or were you so busy cooking that your children had to be nursed by someone down in the quarters because of the work you were doing? I wish I could talk to you, Mama Critty. 11 children. You doing all the cooking for whoever was at that table. Oh, God, Mama Critty, I wish I had listened to the stories. You know, I grew up hearing all the people always saying, you know, if I had to be a slave, I'd rather be a slave in the house than a slave in the field. But after I read your story, I don't know so much about that, Mama Critty, because you might have been the slave that worked here. But the slaves that worked in the quarters, sometimes when they got tired in the evenings, they had each other to come together to try to get the strength to go back in those fields one more day. Where did you get your strength, Mama Critty? Did you get it from your 3 boys? When they were over in the quarters, after they had worked from sun up to sundown, they might sit around that fire for a moment and just come together, and they might sit there trying to get the strength to get ready for another day, and they might start to say, I've got a feeling that everything's gonna be all right. And that might have been what gave them enough strength to get up and do it one more time. Where was your strength, Mama Critty? Where was your connection to all of your people? You were over here. Don't tell me that it was easier out there, because you were up here by yourself and it still wasn't easy. You still worked from sun up to sundown. Don't tell me it was any easier. And nothing easier about being owned There was no easy. Mama Creedy, there's so many things I wish I could talk to you about and ask you. You were responsible for cooking for the entire family, but they locked up the spices. You watched her take a key and unlock the sugar and the other spices because those were precious. Weren't you precious? Weren't you cooking for the family? But you could cook for everybody, but we got to lock up the sugar. Oh, Mama Creedy, I wish I could talk to you. I wish I could ask you questions, but I can come here. I can stand in your space, and I can tell you, first of all, Mama Creedy, I am so sorry. I am so sorry I did not listen to you. I'm sorry. I can also tell you, Mama Creedy, thank you. Thank you for the work you did here at Red Hill. It was not done in vain because, Mama Creedy, I'm a chef. That means people pay money for me to cook for them, and that's because you in my veins, Mama Creedy. Yes. And I want to tell you, Mama Creedy, I'm putting together a book. And all these stories that I found will be in this book. And the next time we get together with family, I'm giving this out to everybody. Because I'm standing here today, Mama Creedy, to tell you, Mama Creedy, you will never be forgotten.
Wow. Stand up and take another bow. Let's give her another hand clap.
Let me just say this. When Miss Gloria called me, I tried to come up with every excuse under the sun not to do it. She then threw in Sharon's name, and she knows that's a guilt trip because if Sharon asks, I'm not bright enough to tell her no. I started researching this. This story was fictionalized. It's what would be considered historical fiction. It's taking pieces of history and putting it in a story. When I do this, and I practice and ran it at home, the tears that are running are not fictional tears. Come on. The tears that are running is because Mama Creedy is in all of us, okay? And Mama Creedys across the United States have been forgotten. So these ain't acting tears. I got some of those too, but that's not what these are. These are tears because of who we are. And we are still here. And we will remember. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, it's very interesting because Creedy is a very common name. I've been to 2 other plantations, and the cooks at those plantations were named Creedy also. Wow. See? Wow. Isn't that something? Right, moving right along, and it's hard for me to move forward. My goodness. I was moved at first by the poetry coming from Dr. Mickles, but then I was even more moved by Miss Gloria. Thank God for people like those 2 ladies, because they have a lot of sharing that they give with various audiences, and we are blessed that they joined us today. You see, sometimes you try to find reasons why you shouldn't do something, but God knows best, and He directs you here. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about life at Red Hill. When Africans arrived here on the shores of Virginia more than 400 years ago, they arrived having survived the very difficult conditions of the transatlantic slave trade and the acts of violence administered as they were transferred from the Caribbean and placed plantations in the South as well as the North. It is estimated that approximately 12 million enslaved Africans were violently forced onto ships for trafficking in what they call the New World. Conditions on the ships for the human cargo were deplorable. Africans were often chained to each other to avoid rebellion. Africans were usually then sold in the town square to the slave owners, and their suffering continued and intensified. And of course, we don't know how many people died as they were being transported, and how many of those, when they did reach the shores, jumped in the ocean, killing themselves rather than being enslaved. When Patrick Henry passed in 1799, his property inventory included 67 enslaved Africans, with 32 of those men and women listed as over the age of 16 and very physically healthy. Patrick Henry also owned 112 enslaved Africans at his Long Island, which was in Campbell County, and 7 islands in Halifax properties. These enslaved laborers and their families worked, played, and worshiped right here on the grounds where you're sitting today. During Patrick Henry's ownership, Red Hill produced an average of 20,000 pounds of tobacco per year. 20,000 pounds of tobacco. The cultivation of tobacco was very tedious and very intensive. The process included preparation of the seed beds, fertilizing, planting, transplanting, topping, suckering, priming. Gosh, I'm getting tired just reading all of this. Weeding, worming, cutting, bulking, and then stripping and prizing. A yield of 20,000 pounds of leaf would have required a minimum of 20 enslaved workers tending 50 acres of tobacco at Red Hill. The wheat and corn growing along the slope and lowlands below the plantation house also required attention. On average, one enslaved person could tend 4 or 5 acres of corn, while 4 or 5 enslaved people were needed to reap the same acreage of wheat. And just think, coming up from the cemetery today to the grassy area and then coming over here, I mean, I was drenched in sweat. Can you imagine being out there on the field? One person being in charge of 4 or 5 acres? My God, talk about perseverance, talk about hope, talk about faith. Other work done by the enslaved population, as indicated in the estate inventory, would have included caring for livestock, which included 156 cattle, 155 hogs, 60 sheep, and 22 horses. Livestock duties included fencing in the fields, building and repairing the pens, heaping and hauling manure, as well as castrating lambs, shearing sheep, milking cows, and fattening and slaughtering the hogs. Can you imagine? Any enslaved people who were not working in the fields or with livestock at the plantation would have served as domestic servants assigned to work in the main house, the kitchen, and in the laundry. Enslaved Africans also were expected to operate the tannery and the distillery, as well as the plantation store and blacksmith shop. Now, who were some of those enslaved Africans whose families worked here at Red Hill? Thanks to the 1799 estate inventory, the research staff here at Red Hill have listed a few who live here, and they've identified the jobs that they perform. So I'm just going to read through them. There was a gentleman named Jesse. He was very skilled and highly prized because he was a blacksmith. Pedro, he served Patrick Henry for most of his adult life and was a trusted messenger and a coachman. Dinah and Beck, they were both described as old women in the decline of life, but they had been with Patrick Henry since his very early days at Roundabout Plantation, and they were actually given as wedding gifts in 1754. Shadrach would have been between 12 and 16 and was listed in the 1802 inventory as the family's coachman. Harrison, the family's coachman, had lived with the family since his childhood, where he attended to Mrs. Henry, carrying her basket and yarn for her. Harrison lived past the age of 100 after having worked for 4 generations at Henry's Red Hill. The coachman cabin, which you can visit, can still be seen, was given to him by William Witt Henry as a reward for his years of service to the family. But he was already 100 years old. He had 2 brothers named Jack and Coleman. Critty, which we talked about before, Harrison's mother, she was the family cook, and as Gloria mentioned, Mr. Henry had 11 children, so there were a lot of mouths to feed. Patrick Henry's sudden death in 1799 at 63 years old had a profound impact on Red Hill's enslaved population. He willed to his wife, Dorothea, his estate along with 20 enslaved workers that she could choose. He gave her permission to free 1 or 2 of them if she so desired. By 1805, she had freed at least 5. The other enslaved laborers at Red Hill were distributed among his 17 children as part of their inheritance. After the estate was settled, more than 2/3 of the enslaved workers had been moved from the plantation. Their departure had a devastating effect on the enslaved community of families that were left at Red Hill. Fathers, mothers, children, and grandchildren were sent to live in different places, devastating the structured family unity here at Red Hill. There's much to be said about Patrick Henry's complicit and complicated actions about the practice of slavery in the United States. However, like other American founding fathers, such as George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, who were born here in Virginia, Patrick Henry voiced his opposition to slavery, yet he was a conflicted slave owner. Today we are gathered here in a solemn, sacred burial ground that holds at least 3 generations of African Americans, some whose families are here with us today. As you heard earlier, we have a couple of descendants who were part of the earlier program. We mark this day as a new beginning that has ushered us into an education about all families that contributed to the development of this plantation and allows the Red Hill staff to share a rich and abiding history that changes our family stories. So I'm going to now bring back Hope Marston, and she's going to talk about the changes at Red Hill, and she'll talk to you about the community's continued involvement as Red Hill moves forward. Hope?
Thank you, Ramona. I had asked Dr. Brian Bates from the Longwood Institute of Archaeology, who has done a lot of our work here on the Quarter Place, to come today to talk about his work, but he could not be with us today, but he had a good excuse. He is at work on his 41st field school down the river. But I will just briefly highlight the work his team has done on the Quarter Place to date. When we were able to acquire the Quarter Place Cemetery at the end of the trail just a few years ago, we had no idea what was there, other than that one marked headstone of Matilda Pennell. So in 2019, we partnered with Brian and his team to survey the cemetery. Using LiDAR technology,
they identified 147 graves at the site and thus started our journey on the Quarter Place project. In February of 2020, Brian and his team conducted a pedestrian survey of about 2.5 acres near the middle of the Quarter Place Trail and did some subsurface testing of some features identified during the walking survey. The sites they tested revealed a foundation dating back to the early 1800s that likely functioned as a dwelling or either a kitchen. The testing also revealed 3 additional graves, confirming the presence of an unmarked burial ground. In December of last year, Brian and his team conducted a GPS and pedestrian survey of the whole half-mile trail, consisting of 250 feet on each side of the trail, encompassing 27 acres. A number of surface features were discovered, as well as some artifacts, including stacked stones and abandoned paths. Their locations were recorded and the whole area was mapped. Investigation below the surface is required to identify these newly discovered features, and we hope that will be our next step with Brian and his team. In conjunction with the archaeology work, as many of you know, we have been diligently researching to uncover who was buried in the cemetery and to connect to many of you. We still have much more research to do, but having everyone here today is a great way to potentially identify descendants. Peyton Young and Sasha Erpenbach are both here today and are here to answer questions and get any information that you may have. So please visit them if you get a chance after this. And if not, I'm available. I have my card. You can get in touch with us at any time. We have to continue this research and find more descendants and find out who else is down there and their stories. So if anybody can help us out, we would appreciate it. In addition to the research we have done on the enslaved people, we have also been researching what their lives were like when they were here. We want to pull all of this information together along with any artifacts and structures that are on the Quarter Place to create new exhibits, recreate our old exhibits, and include all of our discoveries into Red Hill story that we have been telling for decades. To begin this process and ensure that Red Hill does justice to the enslaved, we plan to engage Veronica Jackson of the Jackson Design Group to provide content and exhibit development for the Quarter Place project. This will include an exhibition vision, a theme, a story, artifacts, and other visual material to be used to interpret the Quarter Place story. It is our goal to restore the voices and center the stories of the enslaved at Red Hill, to encourage visitors to re-examine their understanding of Patrick Henry. We want to interpret and acknowledge the enslaved whose legacy affects many aspects of Red Hill today. We are just beginning the conceptualization stage and welcome all of you to share your ideas as part of this project. We want everyone involved, so anyone who wants to help with this, we welcome your input. It is your stories, it is your ancestors' stories, not mine, and Veronica is our medium to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Hope. I just want to reiterate something that Hope said. She has been instrumental, along with Gloria Braxton, who's going to be coming up in a minute, in moving this whole process forward. And if any of you out there have the time, and even if you don't have but a little bit of time, please go and speak to Sasha or Hope, because you might
be able to give a little more information which will be helpful to them to move forward. Sasha's in the back. Raise your hand. Hope is here. Okay. Because they really are very, very dedicated. I have a lot of respect for the staff here at Red Hill. They have really taken on this project and they've moved it forward. And they're not going to stop. They're going to continue to move it forward until they uncover as much history as they possibly can. But they need your support and your help. So please, I urge you, talk to them. If you know any information or if you're looking for information, please, before you leave today, come and talk to them. Thank you. Now, I'm going to invite my good friend, Dr. Gloria Braxton, up here. Gloria has really been the quiet woman behind the scenes. So here she is, out in the front, and she'll give you a little more history.
I sense it, and I'm actually going to fast forward. One of the things that I just wanted to mention, we've talked a lot about do not forget, remember, and I actually had another poem that I'm not going to read, but I'm going to tell you, I want to encourage you to read Langston Hughes' 1931 poem called The Negro Woman. Yes. Okay? And a couple of lines I just want to reiterate, and that is, Langston Hughes, he was writing as an African-American male, but he was writing in the voice of the Negro woman. Okay, this is 1931, and essentially, the poem, again, we've heard a lot about the strength, the power of African Americans who grew up, who endured, who had to live with the impact that slavery brought. But three lines I want to share with you. She says, children, the Negro mother is speaking. So, children, I come back today. Why? In order that the race might live and grow. She says, and we've heard a lot about all of the trials and tribulations that went on, so I'm not going to share that right now. But what she says in the end, she says, all you dark children in the world out there, remember my sweat, my pain, my despair. Remember my years heavy with sorrow. And get this is the point I want to make. And make those years a torch for tomorrow. Why are we here today? To pick up that torch that our ancestors left. We will carry that torch to make sure that the fire burns and that it burns so brightly, so vividly, that it shines a light on our tomorrows. So let us, as everyone has reminded us today, let us never, ever forget. Langston Hughes, I'm sure, was thinking about a Ghanaian principle of go back and fetch it, okay? Sankofa, it is a bird that is looking backwards.
Yes.
I think he's actually looking this way. I'm not sure. Yeah. Which way is he looking?
It's back
You
looking
would
back.
know. You would
Go
know,
forward.
Sharon. Okay, but
That's it.
she says, the Negro mother says, children, I come back today. Go back and fetch it. We must never, ever forget. Another line she says in here, carrying in my body the seed of the free. So we are seeds.
Yes.
We are seeds carrying what? That torch.
So this is where I want to leave us today, and let us move forward in love. Let us move forward in hope, tolerance, and of course, justice. So, speaking on behalf of the committee, the Community Engagement Committee, we again thank Red Hill for what? The open door.
That's right.
We thank them. This day, hope, will live in our hearts forever. And we know that the stories we were told when we were children, that they are true. They are true. So thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, families. Thank you, friends.
We are going to have our benediction, our formal benediction by Dr. Carlton Jackson. And right after that, please don't leave, because we have Sharon and the Kuumba dance group, and they will be performing immediately after the benediction. And then we invite you to walk around, take a look at some of the cabins and some of the information that's up at the table, and enjoy the rest of your day. And please be safe getting home.
Certainly, we want to say this has been a great day, and we have been really enjoyed our time together, and remembering and bringing back to memory. You know, history is very, very important, and it's important that we teach our children they might know the story. That's been a great day. I want to say to the Red Hill Foundation, thank you so much for opening this door, and as we continue forward, we look for greater and better things. Let's pray. Father, we are grateful and thankful for this opportunity to be a part of what has happened today that has taken us back many, many, many years. But yet we look to you, who is the author and the finisher of our faith, the one who leads and guides us and directs us in all of our paths and our journeys in which we go. Pray now that you'll be with us as we depart from this event, that we might continue to look for the future events, that as we learn more, that we might be able to share more. Thank you for safety. Thank you for your guidance. Now bless us as we depart. In Jesus' name, amen.